In recent days, OPEC's bold moves have taken the global oil market by storm, throwing the United States' energy strategy into question. For a long time, it seemed like the U.S. had its energy game under control. With record shale oil production and energy independence on the horizon, America looked like it was on track to becoming the world's largest energy exporter. However, OPEC's actions are causing a massive shift in the global energy balance. With countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia taking the lead, OPEC's strategy to cut oil production and raise prices is now challenging the very foundation of the U.S. oil industry. But what does this mean for you and me? Are we witnessing the collapse of the United States oil industry? Or is this just another temporary adjustment in the cyclical world of oil markets? Let's dive into this storm and explore the truth behind OPEC's game-changing moves. OPEC's latest production cuts are shaking up the status quo. For months now, analysts have been predicting that the American shale revolution would make the U.S. a dominant player in global energy markets. The U.S. oil industry was soaring, reaching record production levels in 2024 with more than 13.4 million barrels per day a. But then came the unexpected cuts by OPEC in early 2025, particularly by Saudi Arabia and Russia, aimed at driving global oil prices up. This has left many asking, is OPEC trying to corner the U.S.? To put things into perspective, we saw Brent crude oil prices drop by 2.45% in the early months of 2025, signaling just how volatile the situation has become. For context, this affects global oil prices and, by extension, gas prices at the pump, heating bills, and the cost of everything from food to transportation. At the same time, we're seeing electric vehicles, EVs, and renewable energy rapidly gaining ground. As global electric vehicle sales are projected to rise by 17% in 2025, it becomes clear that oil demand might start shrinking, not just from a supply perspective, but also from a consumer preference shift. These developments have put the U.S. in a tough spot. On one hand, higher oil prices benefit U.S. shale oil producers in the short term. On the other hand, volatility, coupled with geopolitical instability, is making buyers wary. This could create a tug of war between competing oil suppliers, leaving us to wonder, can the U.S. keep up with OPEC's powerful move? OPEC's production cuts aren't just about manipulating prices, they're also a geopolitical power play. With Saudi Arabia and Russia pulling the strings, OPEC is sending a direct message to the world: we control the price of oil. By slashing production, these countries are aiming to maximize profits by pushing oil prices higher. This has serious implications for both the global economy and the U.S. oil industry. For one, if oil prices continue to rise, it could spark inflation in the U.S., making everyday goods more expensive. Transportation costs would rise, and we'd all be paying more at the gas pump. This situation leaves the Biden administration in a tough spot as it tries to balance national energy independence with a global push toward cleaner energy alternatives. If OPEC continues to control prices, the U.S. might face a recession due to the rising costs of fossil fuels. For the average person, this could mean higher prices across the board and more economic instability. The Trump administration tried to push for energy independence through record shale oil production, but OPEC's power to set prices shows how fragile this strategy can be when facing external factors. In parallel with OPEC's actions, the electric vehicle EV market is booming. EV sales are projected to increase by 17% in 2025, with more than 20 million vehicles expected to hit the roads. This is significant for the oil industry because it represents a shift away from fossil fuels. As more people switch to electric cars, the demand for oil-based transportation will drop. In fact, some experts are already predicting that the oil industry could lose a large portion of its market share to the booming electric vehicle industry. For the everyday person, this shift can already be felt as EVs become more affordable and accessible. At the same time, governments worldwide are introducing incentives and subsidies to promote EV adoption, accelerating this change. On the flip side, higher gas prices due to OPEC's cuts will make the transition to EVs even more attractive. providing a financial incentive to switch away from gas-powered vehicles. However, the oil industry still plays a major role in other sectors, such as aviation, shipping, and heavy industrial use. While the future of transportation is shifting, oil's dominance in these industries is not going away overnight. Despite the U.S. oil industry's record production in 2024, it faces growing pressures. The rising cost of oil production, coupled with environmental regulations, means that shale oil is no longer as profitable as it once was. As a result, U.S. oil companies are experiencing rising operating costs, and their profits are shrinking. In fact, major U.S. banks are starting to pull back from financing fossil fuel projects due to ESG environmental, social, and governance criteria. This is further complicating matters for American oil companies, especially those that rely on shale drilling. If financing dries up, these companies may face massive layoffs and exploration activities may slow down. For the average person, this means that the job market could be impacted in oil-dependent areas, especially as companies reduce operations. The cost of living could rise as U.S. oil companies pass on the rising costs of production to consumers. At the same time, OPEC's moves could force the U.S. to depend even more on foreign oil if domestic production cannot keep pace with demand. This would have national security implications, making the U.S. more vulnerable to the decisions of foreign oil-producing countries. The tension between OPEC and the U.S. oil industry is not just about economics, it's a geopolitical battle for energy dominance. OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, is pushing for a tightened grip on global oil prices, while the U.S. is striving for energy independence and an export-driven economy. This battle goes beyond just oil prices. It's about controlling the global energy landscape. As the world shifts towards renewables, the question arises, will fossil fuels remain dominant, or will green energy take the lead? For the average person, this means the future of global trade and economic stability could hinge on this fight for energy supremacy. Rising oil prices, caused by OPEC's production cuts, could lead to higher inflation, making everyday expenses, especially travel and heating, more expensive. At the same time, technological innovation in green energy could offer a solution to reduce dependence on oil, but this transition will take time and investment. For now, though, OPEC's power move could put the U.S. economy at risk. In conclusion, OPEC's bold production cuts are forcing the U.S. oil industry to reconsider its position in the global energy market. While some are predicting the collapse of the U.S. oil industry, others believe that through technological innovation, the U.S. can still thrive. As renewable energy and electric vehicles gain momentum, the long-term outlook for oil may not be as bright as it once was. However, in the short term, high oil prices could fuel inflation, causing economic pain for consumers. For everyday life, we'll likely see higher costs in the form of gas prices and utility bills. At least until green energy becomes more widespread, the transition to renewables is inevitable, but it won't happen overnight. In the meantime, the battle between OPEC and the U.S. is far from over, and it will shape the future of energy for decades to come. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to stay updated on the latest in global energy and economic trends, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more insights.
Now using them to pressure foreign governments into making concessions. This political stance is not without its everyday implications. For instance, if you're planning to purchase a new car, one that is assembled using parts that cross the border multiple times, you might soon face a price tag that is several $1,000s higher. American households, which currently bear an estimated additional tax burden of over $800 per year from tariffs on Chinese imports alone, may soon see even steeper increases if tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods are fully implemented. As these policies ripple through the supply chain, the cost of everyday items you rely on is set to increase, directly affecting your personal budget. Chapter 3: Economic Fallout. Impact on the U.S. economy and jobs. When we look at the broader economic fallout, the picture becomes even more concerning. Economists predict that supply chains across the United States will be significantly disrupted by these tariffs, forcing companies to absorb higher production costs that eventually get passed on to consumers. Recent studies suggest that consumer prices could rise by an average of 0.5 to 2.2%, a change that may seem modest in percentage terms, but translates into higher monthly expenses for every household. Furthermore, research indicates that over 400,000 American jobs could be at risk as businesses adjust to these new cost pressures. In regions like the Midwest, where auto manufacturing is a major employer, job losses could be particularly severe. For instance, if you work in an auto parts factory or an assembly plant, your job security may be threatened by these macroeconomic changes. Additionally, the Tax Foundation estimates that the new tariff regime could add over $800 to the annual expenses of the typical U.S. household. For families, this means tighter budgets and more careful spending. Whether it's paying a bit more for groceries or facing the prospect of higher car payments, these economic pressures will have a direct impact on your day-to-day life. Job uncertainty might also lead to reduced household income, making it even more challenging to plan for future expenses. Chapter 4. Political and social repercussions. The political and social repercussions of this trade war are also profound. A recent Reuters poll revealed that 54% of American voters now oppose these tariffs, a sentiment echoed by a sharp drop in consumer confidence. The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index has recently fallen by 7 points to 98.3, its lowest level in 8 months. This decline in confidence is not just a number. It represents the growing anxiety among everyday Americans about rising prices and economic instability. This political narrative has fueled cultural and social responses as well. Across the United States, while some Trump supporters have hailed the tariffs as a necessary measure to protect American jobs, many consumers have taken to social media to express their frustration. For many families, the fear of a rising cost of living is very real. Increased prices at the checkout, higher gasoline costs, and even the possibility of delayed investments in homes or vehicles are concerns that directly affect your quality of life. When you hear discussions about trade policies and tariffs on the news, know that these aren't just abstract numbers. They directly influence the prices you pay at the store and the job security in your community. Chapter 5. Future prospects. Ongoing negotiations and what's next as negotiations between the US, Canada, and Mexico continue. Both Canada and Mexico have agreed to a temporary 30-day pause on the new tariffs to work out additional security measures. For example, Mexican officials have promised to deploy 10,000 National Guard troops to their border, and Canada is investing $1.3 billion in advanced surveillance and infrastructure. While these temporary measures may offer a short-term reprieve, the underlying uncertainty remains. U.S. advisors have signaled that additional tariffs, possibly on auto parts, electronics, steel, and other goods, could be introduced in the coming months. Some analysts predict that if these tariffs are expanded further, U.S. vehicle prices could rise by as much as $2,700 on average, placing a heavy burden on families already facing high costs. For everyday consumers, this means a difficult choice: whether to make big purchases now before the full impact of the tariff sets in, or delay them in the hope that negotiations might eventually lead to lower prices. This uncertainty forces you to weigh your options carefully. If you're planning to buy a car, a new television, or even a refrigerator, you might decide to act sooner rather than later to avoid potential price hikes. Chapter 6. Broader implications for everyday living. Zooming out, the broader implications of these tariff policies become even more clear. U.S. imports from Canada, Mexico, and China make up nearly 42% of all products entering the country. If the average tariff rate on these goods were to triple from about 2.5% to over 7%, the resulting price increases could have a dramatic effect on household spending. Analysts at the Tax Foundation and the Budget Lab at Yale University project that American consumers might lose up to $1,200 in purchasing power annually due to these tariffs. For a family carefully budgeting each month, this loss means fewer resources for essentials like healthcare, education, or leisure activities. Imagine having to pay an extra $50 in your monthly grocery bill, or noticing that your monthly auto insurance premiums have increased because of higher costs in imported auto parts. These seemingly small changes add up over the year and place a strain on household budgets, especially for lower-income families who spend a larger share of their income on physical goods. Furthermore, this uncertainty may force businesses to pass on their increased costs by raising prices, reduce hiring, or even cut back on investments. In practical terms, this means that the quality of services in your community, from local schools to public transportation, could suffer, affecting everything from your commute to your children's education. In conclusion, Canada's $155 billion retaliatory tariff package and the subsequent U.S. tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China are not just abstract policy shifts, they are real changes that will affect your everyday life. Whether you notice higher prices at the grocery store, more expensive cars, or increased gas prices, the impact of these trade policies is set to touch every aspect of our daily routines. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you plan to adjust your budget in light of these changes? Have you already noticed a difference in the prices of your everyday essentials?